Dive into this pocket of joy where I'm joined by Mary Kennedy, a wise woman in the Celtic tradition, to discuss living according to the Celtic wheel, with the rhythms within us and in tune with the changing seasons, like this current Celtic festival time of Lughnasadh. She shares some amazing insights on changing our perception of time to help us feel less rushed, rebalancing our energies from the linear masculine way causing burnout to leaning back into our feminine energy and restoring our balance. So many nuggets of wisdom here, and you can watch the video version on YouTube. So Mary Kennedy, thank you so much for joining us on Pockets of Joy podcast. I'm delighted to have you and I can't wait to catch up, hear all your news and hear about the work you're doing, which looks so exciting. It seems to be building in momentum every time I log on to my social media. It's fantastic. So do you want to give us a little intro into you and your work for anyone who hasn't followed you yet?
Yeah. Thanks, Niamh. Well, lovely to be here first. Really nice to reconnect. It's been a few years, but like you, following your work and seeing how yours is growing in strength, I think it's just, this great time on the planet when this work, to me, it's the work of the feminine, and bringing the feminine back very much through wellness. And I love the fact that this podcast is called Pockets of Joy, which I think particularly right now, because we're recording at Lughnasadh, and Lughnasadh to me is really about reconnecting or looking at our relationship to joy. My work really has been an evolution through the last 20 years of being on this path, and it really comes from, my own personal path of being a woman at this time on the planet, and really reclaiming my sovereignty, I think, is at the center of it, which is, what does sovereignty mean? And it can be a difficult word, but I suppose what I mean by sovereignty is like reclaiming that sense of really having myself as a woman, because I think what we have gone through and men have gone through, and all humans, whatever gender you identify with, have gone through, is a repression of the feminine, and therefore an unhealthy masculine, a relationship with the masculine, or showing up. So I suppose sovereignty, I come from that, and I come at it through the Celtic tradition, really, particularly. That's what's really been the wisdom that has offered me a pathway or a map into how to reclaim my sovereignty. And and I work mostly and primarily with the Celtic wheel. So I gather women, like I gather women from all over the planet, who are interested in working with, Celtic cyclical wisdom, and the Celtic wheel is the main map or framework that we work with. And also, this reclaiming of the feminine through the work and the sovereignty is through nature, and the importance of reconnecting to nature, and this a lot of my work, when I feel into it more and more, it's like moving us from being very fragmented and separate, like the masculine and feminine were separate, spirit and soul were separate, nature and humans. So my work is about, like, sovereignty really is about coming back to center, and then really bringing all of that in. So healing the split, that's happened through the patriarchal era, which has been 5,000 years. Yeah, so that's really my work, and I do it a lot online, and more now it feels like the next evolution is I'm coming back into more in person, which is great too. I've just been kind of listening for the last 18 months, really, or 2 years, to like, where does this want to go? So it feels like that's where it's moving to. Yeah. So that's my work, and I love it, and I feel really blessed to be doing it.
And I think what I see from you is, as a woman, I've always looked up to you for a businesswoman, B, a woman who's following really what is connecting with her emotionally, spiritually, everything. And you've always seemed to me to be one of the most authentic businesswomen out there. I remember beginning the wellness clinic very nervously, about to step into the corporate space, and meeting you, and you said, "You're ready. Look, you're ready, just do it." I just want to ask another nuts and bolts about your business. Do you work one-to-one with people, or do you work in groups? Do you run online groups? How does that look at the moment?
So at the moment, no, I have stopped my one-to-one. I worked for 16 years with women as a coach for women. But part of this work is a deep listening, you know, when you work cyclically. So I've been listening, I was listening, and about, yeah, a year and a half ago would be, I just knew my body was telling me, okay, no more one-to-ones. This is, you know, right now anyway. So I work online with, I gather women through the Celtic Wheel, and we journey for through the eight festivals of the Celtic year. And that's a global community of women that every year we travel through those. That for the last, I'm about to head into my 7th year of doing that. And I've been living the wheel myself for 13 years. So it's so interesting when you keep journeying through that spiral. And then the other stuff is, as I say, I feel like I'm coming back into more the in person. The land is calling me to bring people onto the land. So I'm not really sure how that's going to look, but that's what's coming, it feels. Well, I know for one way it's going to happen is there's 7 years of journeying through the wheel with women. I've just launched my facilitator training. It's been percolating and waiting for the right time for it wanting to come forward. So that's happening in November. So that's going to be exciting. It's going to be starting to train facilitators in the body of work that I've created around Next Stage Celtic Wheel. So it's great. Yeah, very excited.
Very, very exciting development. How do people who haven't heard of the Celtic Wheel, can I explain it for one very practical thing that always comes up for me every January? When January rolls around and I'm doing corporate talks and we're talking, you know, people ask about setting New Year's resolutions, and then you've got the, oh God, not this again. I think that's our nature telling us this is not the right time to be setting any New Year's resolutions. We are in the middle winter. Like, this is the time we need to be hibernating still. So I'm always teaching that from that kind of point of view. This is our hibernation time, and we shouldn't even be looking at planning for the future or anything that takes too much cognition until at least spring begins. Isn't that a very, I suppose, practical way to enter into the whole idea of the Celtic Wheel?
Yeah. I mean, I think what the Celtic Wheel is, it disrupts the old linear masculine, over masculine way of showing up in the world. And certainly that's one of the really practical ways. It's like, yeah, we're still deeply in the belly of winter and in the feminine, in the dark half of the year, you know, and at that time, which is really, you know, New Year's is really connected, you know, in that time around the winter solstice. And we need to be dreaming, you know, we're like, because we are forces of nature, you know, we have those rhythms of nature. And so seeds are still deep inside the earth, you know, they're still dormant. And so it's a dormancy that at that stage we're really listening, you know. So I think I love that you do that, and particularly in the corporate setting, which is so, you know, I worked and in there on different levels, and I know, you know, it is how it moves is not through the rhythms of nature, sadly. It's much more that linear push, you know, force. Um, you know, it's instead of a beautiful circle of the wheel, it's like a square, you know, it's like pushing, all of that kind of. So it's great that you're teaching that. But that's one. And I think what the wheel did for me, and that's why I hear it more and more, or all the time from women, it's like it gave me permission. You know, it gives me permission to rest. It gives me permission to go slower. It gives me permission to be in my back body, to lean back rather than in the front body, forcing and pulling and reaching and grasping, you know. So yeah, it's that same thing of like, oh my God. And we are these cycles, but we've just forgotten. They're in our bones.
They are, and women struggle every month with a full week or more every month, depending on how their body is, where they are pushing through to show up for that 9 to 5 masculine corporate energy, and it just does not work, and they're burnt out, they're suffering hormone issues because of the stress. It has such a knock-on effect on mental and physical health, and I feel I'm really called to open women's eyes to this, or anyone who has traits, because I feel like it needs to come from people who menstruate themselves to say to their managers, I need menstrual leave. This is something I only heard of recently that actually exists in a couple of countries already, where they can have paid menstrual leave, and I
That's
really
amazing.
feel it has to come from the ground roots upwards. We need to say, I can do double the work in my ovulation week when I'm on point and I've got my high energy and my brain is rattling along at 2 times speed. But then I need to sit back for a week every month as well. I'll still get the same amount done across the course of the 4 weeks, but it'll look differently. I think that's really important for people to advocate for that.
Oh, I think it's so important. And because I came to a place where I was I had infertility issues. And I actually learned, this was way before, I was in my 30s now in my late 50s, but I was, I actually went through fertility treatment that my body just showed me through an old napro technology, they were called, because I wanted to do it more naturally, even though I wasn't into this at this stage. It was my mid-30s. And my body showed me that I was double ovulating because I was really stressed. I was really burnt out, actually, when I look back at it. So I think you're absolutely right. It's like, I just love the idea that there are some companies that do that, but I also think we don't even have to wait for companies to do that. If women, I mean, I'm way past bleeding now, but I see, sports and everything, we're just pushing ourselves right through the 4 months or the 4 weeks, and to really move with your rhythms, and to demand it, absolutely. But also I would hope women at my stage who now see, who are in these companies and who see, oh my God, I didn't have that wisdom back then, that they could really advocate in there as, people who are changing the system within the system,
Mhm.
So I think it has to come from all areas to, to really bring change. Yeah. But I love that you're doing that, Niamh.
Yeah. And I feel like, especially with women owned businesses like my own, your own, I've always worked within my own cycle. I'm always showing up, really at my high points of the month, and then I'll step back for the month, for the weeks that I can't, or the days that I can't. And I still have processes to carry on through, and I will push through if I have a client facing work, obviously, but I will always try and schedule ahead so that I know when I will be working at my best. And I
Oh,
think the rise in women-owned businesses, I think we will hopefully see more balance. It may not come from the traditional masculine corporate world, and I think women who rise up to the higher levels, or who last through menopause, which is still an achievement to retain a job in that world through that difficult decade that we do have in our 40s. I don't know if they would be so comfortable rocking the boat, and I think maybe they've had to suppress that side of themselves so much they don't even realize what they've done in that way. So
yeah, and yet I do think sometimes people find themselves in that place, and when you do go through menopause, you find your voice, so you're not so, so I do think there may be people, women maybe even listening to this, who are in there who, yeah, it's uncomfortable to rock the boat, but actually they've been through what they've been through at this stage, and hopefully they'll find a way to speak what needs to be spoken in
yeah,
these places.
I,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm hoping there will be all these multi strands. And can you
Yeah.
talk a little about Lughnasadh, because this will go out probably the second week in August. So
Oh, yeah.
explain for anyone who's not sure what Lughnasadh is. I remember a vague memory of it from primary school, learning about the Celtic festivals, but
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you offhand what Lughnasadh means. So would you give us a
Well,
rundown?
yeah, well, maybe I think it would be probably useful to even just give you an overall of the wheel in case anybody out there that's listening doesn't really know what the Celtic wheel is. So the Celtic wheel is really the 8 festivals in the Celtic tradition. So, you've got the solstices and equinoxes, and then in between each of those, you've what are called cross-quarter days, and they're, Samhain, which begins the wheel in October, end of October, early November. Then you have the winter solstice. Then you have Imbolc, which is the next cross-quarter day, which is the beginning of spring at February. Then you've got the spring equinox in the middle of March. Then you have Bealtaine, which is the third cross-quarter day, which is at the beginning of May. And then you have the summer solstice, as we know, around the 21st of June. Then we have Lughnasadh, which is where we're at now, which is the fourth cross-quarter day in the beginning of autumn in the Celtic tradition. And then you've got autumn equinox, which lands in and around the 20th, 23rd of September. So those are that's how the Celtic tradition, and I mean, it's not just Celtic, it's pre-Celtic, but it's known generally as the Celtic wheel. And so what I'm interested in doing is how do we, I've called it my work Next Stage Celtic Wheel, because it's like, how are we evolving this so that actually it can bring the ancient lost wisdom with the modern science that we know to really evolve ourselves as humanity. So Lughnasadh happens really, it's the 7th festival. So we started at Samhain because in the Celtic tradition everything starts in the darkness. So then we get to Lughnasadh, which is the harvest. It's the beginning of the autumn or the fall, and it is the time when the tribe would have gathered for great merriment, festivity, and celebration before they went into the hard work of the festival. So all of this information comes from mythology, from archaeology, from folk tradition. Like there's a very strong folk tradition in this country around Lughnasadh in particular. So it's the harvest festival, and it's like, I mean, Dancing at Lughnasadh, Brian Friel's great play, is exactly about that. It's those old traditions of you go up high on a mountain, and you celebrate and you bury flowers and you pick bilberries because the bilberries are the first fruit. So we look at it in terms of the folk traditions, and that's why I love the fact that I'm doing it here with this Pockets of Joy, because for me at Lughnasadh we are working with our relationship with joy. Because what's beautiful, and throughout the Celtic Wheel itself, it's always joy in relationship with sadness. Because it's the end of, the summer has come to an end. We're moving back towards the darkness. There's a sadness in that. There's also the cutting of the first sheaf of grain, which means there's a death, There's been growth and fertility and expansion, and now we're cutting that, but in order to feed ourselves. So because the Celtic tradition and the Celtic mind is so connected to nature, there is this feeling of sadness too, of, oh, this beautiful growth has to be cut in order to sustain ourselves. So there's a sacrifice, there's a sadness, but then there's great joy because there's bounty that will keep us through the winter. So it's this lovely reciprocity with nature and her cycles, and the giving and the receiving between. And so Lughnasadh is all about I call it now the wild crack, because I also feel like it's something that we've lost, in this world we're in. It's in this in-between worlds where there's such a lot of suffering, and there's so that toxic masculine. I mean, I don't really like the word toxic masculine, so maybe I wouldn't use that, but like that hyper masculine, that, where the excess masculine, solar masculine is, is really showing up in the world, and it's intensifying, and it's a real sense of, as Lughnasadh here in Ireland, like we often get a lot of showers, like real storm showers at this time, because it's like the feminine is coming in to dampen down the heat of the solar masculine. So in that way, it's, right now where we're at on the planet, we need more feminine. We really need more feminine to help balance and tether and temper the masculine. That's, we see in the wars, we're seeing in politics. It's just this, power over, this old relationship to power that is not going to help, not going to sustain us as humans on this planet, So I'm going a roundabout way of weaving lots of things in. But this is what Lughnasadh is. The feminine is, this wild, intuitive. She knows how to play and celebrate and be joyful. And it's a very important piece to bring in, even with the sadness and the fear and the worry and the anxiety that we're all feeling. I'm really with this Lughnasadh, because, if we stay in that fear and get taken over by the fear and the sadness and the heaviness that we're all feeling about being alive, then that's what we're going to leave to our descendants. I don't think it's sustainable. It's like we're all becoming more imprisoned by it. So yes, we must honor the sadness and the grief and the fear of a dying world and of this wild masculine that's out of control. So we have to honor the feelings that brings up, but we then must, I feel like it's a really important thing to take those moments, like those pockets of joy, and really, savor and linger and grow our capacity for joy as well. And I think the evolution of this is that we can allow both. In that way, we're living whole and the full range of being human. But the danger is that we will fall back into, fear and heavy sadness, and we get just so powerless in that.
Yeah. And I
So,
think we're letting it win if we do let it pull us down. So I think
okay,
people find it hard to make a distinction between feeling empathy for the suffering that's going on, but then also being able to switch that off at some point to live their daily life and to be present for themselves and for their families and friends. So, and I think people feel it's a little bit selfish to turn your back and have some fun or go out and celebrate something
yeah,
when there's all that other suffering. But if we don't keep going and show the way for the next generations, what happens then? That's why I started the
absolutely. And
podcast,
you're right.
was to bring this lightness,
Great.
because there was so much darkness when I was on my social media. I was nearly just leaving social media for good about a year ago. I just thought, I can't cope. I've unfollowed everybody who shares anything dark, and then I'm still being shocked by people who weren't sharing dark stuff who are now sharing it. And I think it has this grip on us all. And by
Yeah,
creating things, day to day, we're not saying the other stuff doesn't matter, but we're saying we matter and life matters and the future matters, and we need to pave a really good path for ourselves.
yeah. And the feminine knows how to like alchemize darkness. So, it's a radical act, in my view, to actually show up to your joy, because we are rewiring. Like that's what neuroscience shows us. Like we can rewire when we register joy, and it takes 30 seconds to register joy. It takes 30 seconds to register, a positive emotion over a negative. It maybe even take longer these days, but that was the neuroscience about 2 years ago, that we attach to the negative very easily. And that's a whole evolutionary coping mechanism. But now I feel like this is part of the rising feminine and the wild crack, the wild intuitive, life force of the feminine, Eros. And she's like, come on, we can actually alchemize this through joy and crack and wildness. And that's what Lughnasadh brings.
Yeah.
Lu, the great god Lu, in the mythology, his foster mother died. She represents the goddess of grain. And when she died, he initiated these funeral games, which were just games of great joy and crack and athletic feats. And this is the wisdom that can show us how to move through the darkness and live with it. It's
Mhm.
not about bypassing it at all. It's actually about being able to flex and flow with it and be able to really honor. Like yesterday, I had my mom down here and my aunt, and it was my brother's birthday, and all the family were around. And it was just such a joy, And I really took my time. This is a Lughnasadh gathering, I felt,
Mhm.
because yesterday was, the beginning of Lughnasadh. And I was like, but it took my really consciousness to actually get out of the busyness of preparing everything for everyone and just sit with these great women. My mother and her aunt, who's 90, or her sister's 95, my mother's 91, another aunt who's about to be 90, and just be there with all of it and just like really savor and linger. And I had to sit on the couch with them and just feel the joy of just being with these great women who've lived these amazing lives, and that's Lughnasadh. And it's moments, it's pockets, like you say, Niamh, it's just pockets. And can I live Lughnasadh and not just know everything there is to know about it? Because that's the old way,
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think even back to the start of your aunt's and your mum's lives, we were in connection with those festivals. We did live according to the wheel only 90 or 100 years ago, or even more recently. I think it's
Yeah,
only really since probably, I'm guessing, the 50s, 60s, when we started to become more globalized with TV and women out working then full-time jobs, maybe from the 70s or 80s on, once the law let them actually work. which had its good and bad points as well, I think, for women and for the family. Not that there was anything bad about women going out to work, but I think we have lost something as women by stepping into a very male dominated workspace. Whereas before, women worked from the home and made money doing laundry or sewing or whatever it was, you know, they still worked. They just didn't work in the corporate environment. But I think it's very recent in our Irish history that we did live according to the Celtic Wheel. So how do you think we have suffered maybe through that disconnect in the last century or so?
Well, with every evolution, there's, you know, there's the great gains and then there's the losses. But it's only when we approach it more consciously then we can really make these decisions about how we evolve. Like what my mom and her generation went through, like they went through an awful lot as women. Like, yes, they were losing, you know, in the 40s. Like my mom was born in 32. In the 30s, 40s, they were losing that. They lost it really, even in my granny's generation. But there were pockets around Ireland that were keeping these things going. But there was a lot of loss even earlier than, you know, the turn of the century. And what I feel they lost, what we all lost, was a connection to nature. Like my mom, and a connection to time that was very different. You know, she talks about coming from school and they'd just like be walking 3 miles from school and they would take 2 hours because they'd be wandering into their neighbors' houses. And, you know, they had this kind of beautiful, not that sense of having to produce and linear and we have to get home and rush and speed. I think that's the most thing that I see with reclaiming this wheel for me is my different relationship to time and, you know, to this enslavement we have to produce and to be always producing and 24/7 on, and how that wrecks our systems, you know. And the other thing is what John, the great mystic and writer John Moriarty called silver branch perception. You know, they had a way of perceiving, they were very connected into nature and, you know, even still at that stage in the last century. And we've lost that. And again, that takes being slow, it takes being much more connected to cycles, that you have a connection to the animus mundi, the soul of the world, that, you know, to me, and that's something that we've really lost and that we're much poorer for.
The idea that
And
we are
that
part of one conscience. Yeah.
completely,
Yeah.
completely, and that we can, it's not all on us. Like I'm not an individual that's trying to strive in the world and make things happen. And that's related back to time and linear, you know, rushing and racing. And yeah, we're all part of you know, I call it the cosmos. Like as John Moriarty would say, you fall out of a story. And they fell out of the story of everything is connected, like the trees and the birds and the bog and the ocean. And people, you know, would have said education when it came in, that was, or, you know, way back in the Enlightenment, you know, that was like that was a less than way to live. But actually, we lost so much when we lost that connection to all things, because we also lost a connection to our soul. So we started to live from the head up. We lost a connection to our bodies. But I would say that would have happened in Ireland well before that. They had lost connection to the bodies through the story that we were told, as, you know, after the famine, particularly. I think, you know, there was a particular colonization that went on of the church, you know, and then the colonization of Ireland through the English, through all of that. So it goes back a long time, but certainly,
It's in our language,
it's in Ireland, yeah, absolutely.
Left in our souls, definitely.
Oh, and it's in our bones.
Yeah.
Like literally, I see it, you know, in myself and others. As soon as you start doing any of this work, it just starts to come alive in us. Yeah.
And I think part of our journey now is to recognize what the previous generations dealt with, and they just had to get by and survive. And I think now we're in the privileged position where food is easy to come by and we're not, you know, working by candlelight. We have so many modern conveniences. We have a better quality of life. It's now up to this generation to heal some of that trouble and trauma that went on, but we can't heal it all in our lifetimes either. And that's only a new concept for me. We'll do our best, and then our children will carry that on, and so on. So it's not up to on. That's too much for us.
It's too, and it goes back to that same thing that we have to be perfect. We have to get it sorted and nail it, and that's all patriarchal mindset still. So it's about really dissolving that within ourselves and knowing, this is my place. I believe every single person that's alive on the planet now has a place in this. And that what is my place and what can I do that doesn't overstretch me, but that feels really true. That's the sovereignty piece that feels really true for me. And I don't judge other people for how they show up.
Yeah.
Because everyone has a little part to play in this, or a big part to play in it.
I still, when I go into a workspace, people still feel it's really selfish to care for themselves. And we're even just talking the basics of like taking the time to prepare a nutritious meal, or taking 5 or 10 minutes to put your feet up in the middle of a busy day, running around between work and children, etc. People still feel that that would be selfish if they were to do it, and they don't have role models for self-care because we didn't see our moms taking a break and having a laugh. Well, I didn't. I know you probably didn't. Most women just worked from morning to night for the family.
Is that mostly women or is it men and women that you meet in corporates?
It tends to be in the women-centered spaces where they'll open up about this, or the one-to-one stuff. But I will always acknowledge it when I'm speaking to a mixed group, because I know there's women sitting there thinking, I have to go home and do all this, and they have the mental load for the evening, whereas the men just think my work day is done. And I'm generalizing here. There are men that help out, but I still know that the mental load for the organizing and the logistics falls mostly to the women in the partnerships. So
that's a huge piece.
Hurdle, and that guilt they feel, and the shame about taking any time out for themselves. There are socially acceptable ways to treat yourself. You can go and spend money and have a manicure or go on a holiday, but in the day-to-day rhythm, we still struggle, I think, to actually find our joy. And that's the tricky bit.
Yeah, and my sense is that it comes from just from working with women and working with myself, is it comes from this age old, again, that patriarchal mindset, that we lost our sense of self. We were taught never to be selfish is to be safe, because you would be dafter in a way, you would be acceptable. And so it's a whole new relationship with self. And it brings you back into the sovereignty. The great Carol Gilligan, who wrote a paper in the 70s called In a Different Voice, she was a researcher in Harvard, and she would talk about women, they would lose themselves in relationship, but there was no self then in the relationship, because they were trying to be selfless. But she said that, well, there's no relationship if there's no self. And so it's the same with ourselves. It's like, I came up with a whole thing called #MeFirst, that I started to go, in order for a kind of remedy for this self, this constantly feeling guilty about taking time for yourself when you should be looking after others or whatever. I would kind of go, okay, #MeFirst, because I have to, nourish myself, self-care. Then I can be there for others. But it's taken a lot of unraveling of an old structures within me that believe that, I should. Yeah.
I'd love to go back to what you said about time, because I have just in the last couple of weeks had a whole new revelation. I feel like I'm at a real period of growth personally. Just this summer, starting the podcast has really sparked something in me, and I feel there's such a knock-on effect in so many different areas for me. It's very exciting. And one of those areas for me was, I felt, because I turned 46 this year, and I felt, oh God, I haven't ticked everything off my list. I'm not where I wanted to be. I thought I'd be there, and I'm only here. And I had this feeling that I was too old to do things, or that it was too late for me to, pick something else up, or even to start this podcast. I just thought, no, I've made my bed. I have to lie in it. I can't do anything different. And then I've just been, I don't know, things have been coming to me. People have been mentioning things, and I've just picked up some concepts that really have helped me settle into this. Number one, I've realized I could live to 100 and I could be completely compos mentis right up to the day I die. So I could not even be halfway through my life yet. Number two, somebody mentioned, I was reading about neurodivergence because I got an autism slash ADHD diagnosis coming up on 2 years ago. And I was reading about how that feeling of being rushed is an actual trauma to the neurodivergent person. And I've seen it in my own children. Whenever I've had mornings where I've said to them, come on, quick, find your shoes, we're in a rush, we're late, they got so stressed out. And I love that we homeschool because we don't have a rush in the mornings. They don't have scheduled activities in the afternoons that they have to be here and there. They've one or two max per week. In fact, only two of my kids have one thing or two things a week. So we've a very relaxed pace of life, and I feel it really suits our spirits. You know what I mean? But growing up myself in the traditional way, I felt rushed a lot. I felt rushed through college. I felt rushed through my 20s. And I've always had this feeling of rushing. And I know it's just the way society is. But I've just realized how much that caused a trauma in me. That feeling that I'm not doing enough, not being enough. I need to go, go, go. And I find it really hard to sit back. I've always described myself as a type A personality, straight A student, high achiever, but also high anxiety with that. And I'm really just learning I need so much downtime. And I've been sleeping a lot and napping. And I've been trying to give myself quiet without distractions, without my phone. And I'm really feeling like I've opened up a whole new internal world through doing that. And isn't that what the Celtic Wheel is all about? It's about, like, time really does expand. You could have 5 minutes off, but you might do so much deep thinking in those 5 minutes. It could feel like an hour. You might be so refreshed. Will you talk a bit about the Celtic Wheel perspective?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there. I'm just so happy to hear all of that because that's very similar to, my own insights and realizations and ahas that have gone on too. And it's wonderful to realize it at 46, that really it sounds like you're really changing your relationship to time and yourself, which is amazing. Wow, Niamh. Yeah, really struck by that. Gorgeous. Yeah. I just feel like my heart just feels so happy and I feel like tears in my eyes at the thought of that and of you not rushing your children, that like if you never did anything else in the world, you could die happy for that, I think.
Yeah, I feel that too, really. Yeah.
Because it's just the little humans are, being really rushed and at such speed these days.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was the same, even though I grew up on a farm in Sligo, I remember thinking, can we just lie and read our books? It was just because it was a farm and people are busy and you were in school and then you have homework and it's just like, oh my God, do we never rest? And I would definitely have felt that and feel it very deeply about myself, that my big, at 38, 39, I had a lot of things fell apart in my life and I had a lot of loss between that and 45. And I remember having this aha moment of about 39, oh my God, I don't even know how to slow down, never mind stop. And like that, I was high achieving, but it wasn't even coming from a conscious place. It was just I was on this treadmill. So that's a big piece of the wheel, is because it's different rhythms. It's not about being so slow that you do nothing. It's about knowing when there's a time to rest, there's a time to renew, there's a time to be absolutely out in the world. And there's a time to be extrovert, there's a time to be introvert, there's a time to be growing your potency, there's a time to harvest it all. And so it's a whole different way of living that, like you're saying, is suddenly when you start to even begin to walk the path of the wheel, you start to see the patterns that have have not allowed you to do that. And there's no, I mean, for me, there's no blame on the generation past, because they went through what they went through. So this is not about blame, but it's about how do I show up now. And the problem is, a lot of the time with the wheel is, even though it's a circle, we approach it with the patriarchal linear mind, that same, I have to do this, I have to get really good at the wheel, and I have to hit all the points on the wheel. And I say to the women doing the wheel, you'll fall off 100 times. You might fall off for 4 months of the wheel or 6 months, but it's still working you. And to just give yourself permission, because that's what it's about. It's about leaning back. It's about coming back into the back body, that feminine, rather than being all in this front body, which is, having to be constantly in production, in achievement, in accumulation. It's like it's a much more about unraveling all those beliefs and all those patterns, and that keep us that keep us speedy and panic. Like what I discovered in me, that there was a panic underneath me, really deep inside. And I just moved out of Dublin a year ago, at the age of 56, and moved down here to Sligo, and I'm on the edge on the beach. And I go out on the beach, and just the expansiveness, my whole body changes completely. It's like, oh my God, instead of this terribly focused, which is very hyper masculine, focused, linear, I'm suddenly out there, and my whole cells are changing. My neurology is changing. And it's like, but I still hit up. I still have that old, I have to do this, and I have to get the wheel out, and I just keep going, no. And like you, I've just taken my phone out. I used to even be addicted to kind of listening to phone, to podcasts, or,
Yeah, learning.
astrology.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, and it's actually, it's a soothing, because I can't actually be with this panic that's underneath me about being in the world, or about, am I safe? So it's connected to that, I feel. And so the more I made big changes when I came down here, and it's been amazing. But the thing I've just done, it's only in the last 3 weeks, I have taken my phone out of my room. And I know I've tried to do that before, but I cannot tell you the difference it's been making in myself, because emptiness is where the inspiration comes. Emptiness is where, and this is where the winter in the Celtic wheel, the winter, emptiness and insight comes in winter. So when we empty out, when we don't reach and grasp and try and know everything, or fill our heads and our bodies with things, actually our own sovereign wisdom comes. And it's amazing. I've been teaching it for so long, and yet I'm only 3 weeks into this next stage, which is no earphones in. I will listen to something, put a boundary around it. I listen to YouTube and podcasts like this, which are really important, but I'm only going to allow myself a certain amount of them.
Mm.
Not this, like every night I have to listen to one, or if I wake up in the middle of the night because I'm going through menopause, I have to put it in. Sometimes that works, but actually for me, I'm seeing no. So I get it totally. And the wheel teaches me that
Yeah.
constantly.
You just brought tears to my eyes describing that process, because that's what I've been feeling. That I feel like I was coming from a place of fear all this time. Fear that I wouldn't make enough money, that I wouldn't. That's really what it came down to. Would I be able to survive in this world without money, without working? What does surviving mean? It means you put in hours, you get paid for those hours. And now I'm seeing there's a whole other way of living, and I have to kind of just lean back and trust that things will work out, and not push all the time, because that is doing damage to me all the time. And yeah, just realizing I need to view everything from a place of love. It's like I've literally pulled off some kind of veil. Even in the last
Wow.
week, I've had another shift, and I'm doing a lot of journaling about it, and
Yeah.
just keeping on telling myself things will be okay, things will work out. You don't have
That's
to
the
push
thing.
so hard.
Yeah. There's a great, one of the things that, at the winter solstice, you hit a point in your life, you know, or a winter solstice point in your life is when you're just like on your knees. You're just like, oh, I can't do this anymore. And, you know, what's this all about? And when one of the mantras that I would use is, no matter how this unfolds, I'll be okay. No matter how this unfolds, I'll be okay. So when the panic comes and the fear, and you're so right, it's like, and it's so hard to be in the world right now because we're surrounded by that. So if we can just come back to ourselves, even moments, it's just moments, hand on the heart, hand on the belly. No matter how this unfolds, I'll be okay.
Yeah. I feel like
That,
the world gave me that this year. There must be something in this. The universe is giving us
yeah,
some kind of a
that's it.
call or lesson. Things have to shift. And now I have become to practice abundance and manifestation and mindset work. And I'm feeling like I just have to trust there's some new way of being. The podcast has built up so much creative juices in me. And
Amazing.
that I never had time to do because I was so busy with the other stuff. But
That's it. You're so busy with the strategic mind deciding.
yeah,
Whereas when you know, like when you empty, when you allow, and emptiness will come, the fallow times will come.
yeah,
And when you allow that to happen, which is so countercultural in our world, like we're told that that is dangerous and that is, you know, weakness and, you know, don't be idle, don't be empty. But actually, all the wisdom traditions teach us that it's the emptiness that's the most fertile and fecund time. But you have to trust that you belong to something bigger in order to allow yourself to empty out
yeah,
and to have times when things are fallow. And I have learned that, you know, I've certainly learned that, you know, I have to let things have their own rhythm. And when they're dying, they're dying. And I cannot try and keep them alive
yeah,
because I'm not showing up to my soul's work or the, you know, the work of that the cosmos or universe wants to move through me. And that's when you can start to trust. But again, it's so important not to apply the old patriarchal, I'm going to nail this leaning back because that's not what happens.
yeah,
Like, it's like I have to learn slowly, incrementally, because the feminine moves so slowly, how to lean back. And then I'll find myself panicked again. And I'll be, you know, in my strategic mind, but then it'll be like, oh no, okay, too much. Okay, lean back. And the more we do that, the more we learn, oh, now is the time to lean back. Now I lean forward. Now I lean in.
yeah.
So it's,
And
yeah,
I think the
it's,
wheel itself, just as a visual, is so comforting because you know things are changing
yeah,
and turning all the time, and the good comes after the bad. There's always something on the way. Whereas if you're in the linear, it's like you're either on it or you're off it, you know, and you have to
you're
get,
either, yeah.
otherwise you've failed. So
You're
it's
you're successful or you're failing, yeah. And you don't do the ebb with you only want to be in the flow. But I'd say the wheel is even more like a labyrinth than even a circle
yeah,
because in the labyrinth you kind of don't really know where you are and you can fall back. And in developmental theory, adult developmental theory, it's that, you know, there are fallbacks as well as moving forward. So that's the thing. If we can just trust the fallbacks or the moments in the labyrinth when we feel like we're miles away from the center, but are actually very close to the center. That's why I love that image of the labyrinth rather than even the circle, because in a circle you can just open it up and make it a line, a
true.
straight line. So it's like it's lots of yeah, it's a journey of ebbs and flows and highs and lows and snakes and ladders and whatnot. Yeah.
I love it. Mary, I've absolutely loved speaking to you today. I wish we could go on longer, but I think time is almost up and my dog is barking at the door. So, how can people find you, and what do you invite them to join you on? What's coming next?
Well, people find me on my website, marykennedy.com. That's Mary with an I, no E on it, Mari. You'll find everything there pretty much. On Instagram, I'm Mary Kennedy Wisdom. What's coming up is the Celtic Wheel starts. I open the doors or the gates into the field of the Celtic Wheel every year for once a year. So that's coming up. The doors are opening on the 11th of October. And then yeah, very excited to start the first or to open up the facilitation training, which will happen on the 15th of November. start on the 15th of November, and that's open for applications from the 9th of August. But it's all on the website and in my Instagram. But
And
thanks. It's been
I would tell people to join your email list as well, because I'm loving just the reminders of where we're at in the Celtic Wheel with these emails coming in every so often. It's really good for me to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, that's a good reminder, actually. Yeah, I forget that. Yeah, I'm really, I really, I feel this wisdom is so important. So yeah, my newsletter is full of, I really curate it every 8 weeks before the festival, and I just, yeah, just to share, some of these practices and rituals and reflections for each of the festivals. Yeah, that is a lovely way to connect. Yeah, thanks. It's been lovely though. I've loved, and I just love the journey where you are in the journey. It's been great. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm sure everyone's going to be inspired by your wisdom after listening to this. And I hope to catch up with you again soon.
Yeah, be great. Loads of love.
Mind yourself. Bye-bye.
You too.
I love that reminder to let things have their own rhythm. I definitely feel the need to control things too much. I also loved when Mary said that emptiness is where the inspiration comes. I'm going to consciously bring more silence into my days. I'll be joining her course in October, and I can't wait to learn more about Next Stage Celtic Wheel. Check out the links for her details below. Thanks for tuning in, and I'd love to know what you loved from this episode. You can email me or DM me on the Wellness Clinic's Instagram. Catch you in the next one.